Hey, Rebel Rouser. I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. We're at episode number 1716 today, and, news breaks. What can I tell you? So, there are some things that, when we're in the middle of talking about them, sometimes they get set to the side a little bit, and so we gotta circle back around to them, and that is what we're going to do today and tomorrow with regard to Queen's Shadow, the novel by E.K. Johnston. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about some fun facts that connect Queen's Shadow to the broader Star Wars story. And on Sunday's episode, here's your sneak preview, we're going to talk about the post-credits scene in Queen's Shadow, which actually sets up the potential for more stories. So, as you might expect as a result of this, the topics on today's show and tomorrow's show are spoilerific. So if you have not read the novel and you don't want the event spoiled for you, then do save this show for a later date. But if you're okay with me spoiling a few things, then let's get into it. And I'll say for, the spoiler situation that, the stuff I'm going to talk about, at least on today's episode, is not necessarily spoiler level for the whole novel itself. It's just, details that are woven into the story that connect, as I said, Queen's Shadow with the broader Star Wars story. And, I guess the appearances of some characters, for example, like that'll, get a little bit spoiled for you just to, set the scene. But, one of the, oh gosh, it's hard to know where to begin because there are so many interesting things. So I'll start backwards, if you will. Later on in the novel, Depa Billaba shows up, and that is a Jedi Master who was also the Master Trainer, if you will, the Master to a Padawan named Caleb Doom, who eventually became Kanan Jarrus, that we know from Star Wars Rebels. Now, Kanan does not appear in the novel, and actually, just based on the timeline, he would not have even been Depa Billaba's Padawan at the time the novel takes place. But he would have been 6 years old, and he would have been training in the Jedi Temple. However, although all senators go to the Jedi Temple as part of their initiation as new senators, Padme did not go to the Jedi Temple. She found their mannerisms and their, whole situation to be rather unsettling, it says in the novel. So she does not actually go to the Jedi Temple. However, she does have some very fond reminiscences about Qui-Gon Jinn and about how he was rather different from other Jedi she had met, and how he had seen through the whole disguise of swapping queen and handmaiden, and yet allowed her to continue the ruse and didn't say anything about it. And ultimately, she reflects that many people on Naboo are lighting sticks of incense for him at the annual remembrances for the Battle of Naboo, that he was very well liked and very well thought of, and there is even a monument to him on Naboo as well. And, I feel like I'm burying the lead a little bit here because there's something I really want to tell you about with regard to this novel, and it's the fact that after she finishes her term as queen, one of the things that Padme decides that she desperately wants to do is do what she can to put a dent in slavery in the Outer Rim. And specifically, she sends her handmaiden, Sabe, on a mission to Tatooine to free Shmi Skywalker. And unfortunately, Shmi is nowhere to be found, and she finds out that the junk dealer lost her, but unfortunately there's no way to trace her because initially Sabe started talking to the slavers, trying to get information, and so then the anti-slavery movement wouldn't trust her on Tatooine, and so she was unable to make any headway in finding out where Shmi might have gotten off to. So, holy cow, I thought that was really amazing that Padme was following up on that. And this is, of course, a few years after the events of the Phantom Menace, namely 5 or so. So, puts it right in between Phantom Menace and the Clone Wars. Anyway, I thought that was rather an amazing bit of detail, but, unfortunately nothing comes of it in terms of any success, as, we knew would happen anyway because of course, the events of Attack of the Clones. So, bit of a bummer there, but pretty amazing that it's been something that was on her mind all along. And It doesn't come up in conversation, obviously, in Attack of the Clones, but I think, that's kind of interesting in its own right. And yet, just the way Padme operates in this novel and what we've seen of her, I would kind of expect her to play that close to the chest anyway and not reveal to Anakin that she had made, that attempt. I will tell you also that if you have ever been upset with the fact that Jar Jar Binks was in place to be able to vote emergency powers to Chancellor Palpatine, well, you have Mon Mothma to thank for that, because she's the one who suggested to Padme the idea about adding an official representative to her delegation. And Padme said, I have just the being in mind, and we're all led to presume that was Jar Jar. So go ahead, take it up with Mon Mothma. All right, I dare you. Also, R2-D2, I can't remember if we've mentioned the fact that he shows up in this, but he does show up in this, and he is referenced by Padme as a hero of Naboo, and Sabé also reflects on the fact that not only did he save her life once, referring to the scene in The Phantom Menace where he repairs the deflector shields on the Queen's starship, but also helped save the entire planet as well. So even though he is monitoring her comings and goings when she's getting a little bit close with someone in the novel, she's still going to be nice to him because, well, he's a hero of Naboo after all. And this is the novel, or this is the, part in the whole timeline where R2-D2 first steps up and becomes more involved in Padme's professional life. And it's because most senators, I guess, have droids that will go with them to meetings where their aides aren't allowed and take notes and whatnot. And Padme doesn't necessarily trust droids for the most part. Gee, I wonder why. But R2-D2 is a little bit different. And even though Padme reflects that it makes her look a little bit low-tech by having a mechanic following her around, the droid is very useful and very loyal and can also electroshock people who get a little bit too close. Thankfully, R2 doesn't have to take things to that level in this novel, but Captain Typho, who becomes her head of security, or one of her heads of security, after the departure of Panaka, is already figuring out how to integrate R2 into his defensive planning. And so that's how R2 becomes more involved in all of that whole storyline. And, there's no way we're going to be able to talk about every little thing. And besides, I wouldn't want to do that to you, because you should read the novel in its own right. It's just enjoyable all on its own. But there are also, a couple other things I want to flag. First of all, Dex's Diner shows up in here. This is, of course, the diner that Obi-Wan visits in Attack of the Clones. And there's also a reference to The Phantom Menace and, onward with Darth Sidious showing up. Even though Padme overhears conversations with some strange person, it's definitely strongly implied that it's Darth Sidious. And he's actually talking to a senator from Onderon. And Onderon, if you'll remember from the Clone Wars and then leading into Rogue One, is the planet from which Saw Gerrera hails. And apparently this senator was in league with Darth Sidious, and part of the plot to eventually have Onderon break apart or break away from the Galactic Republic and move into the Confederacy of Independent Systems, or the Separatists, if you will. So the groundwork for that has another layer of tile drop down for it. And there is one last poignant thing, or at least it was poignant for me, that I will mention to you as well. But first, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to this show if you're not doing it already. And also, I hope you will consider supporting me in delivering this daily dose of joy to you by joining me at patreon.com/SW7X7. And the one poignant thing I was going to flag for you is the fact that when Padme goes to Alderaan, she is hanging out with Queen Breya, and they get to see Apenza Peak. And Breya mentions that this is the mountain that took her heart and lungs when she was going through her own Day of Demand rituals. But for me, it was rather poignant because this is also the mountain where Leia is going through her trials. And the idea of her mother looking out upon the mountain that her daughter would be on, many years later, even though she would never really get to meet her daughter except as a baby, I don't know, that struck a chord with me. I thought that was rather a beautiful touch to the novel. So thank you, E.K. Johnston, for that and all the other very interesting things you wove into the storytelling of Queen's Shadow. And that is going to do it for today's episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.